we had a pressman by the name of Sam, who was a Jewish fellow, and Joe, obviously an old staunch German, and they never saw eye to eye. And Joe got madder than heck one day, I guess, and fired him. And you can't, it's a union. So the union guys walked out. And I came back from, what do I do? And the guy says, well, you're not, you can just go ahead and go in, whatever you want to do. But that lasted for 2 days, and these guys milled around outside. And the union guy came over, and I remember me and another young guy, an apprentice, who didn't qualify for the union as yet. We were in there sweeping the floors and doing whatever we could do to make Joe happy. And this union guy came in, and I remember the arguments, hollering at each other. And then the next thing you know, these guys are walking back in. So I don't know what the outcome was, but I guess the union won because Sam was still there. And but he didn't stick around. He's smart enough to know that he should leave, and he did. I don't think he hung around much more than another month or so. But that's the only union I ever ran into in Rochester. There wasn't, Kodak was the entire town. You had a few other things. The railroad, my grandfather was a union man. Of course, he worked on the Baltimore and Ohio. But the unions, they ran the railroads for years. But we had a real group of implants that joined us back when we were about 1972, when we were in Mountain View there on Rinksdorf, I think it was, or whatever the road, Old Middlefield, yeah. And so anyway, these guys, they confronted us one day that they wanted to form a union, and I didn't really know exactly what to say, but I just said, well, they wanted to meet with them. They wanted their representative to meet with me, and I says, I'm not ready for that, but I'll let you know. So I immediately got on the phone, and Pete Lutterette had sold his company to a company called Wave something or other. And the guy that ran it his first name was Alan Grant. And he was also president of the Bay Area Manufacturers Group. There was a name for it. There was a group of manufacturers from the Bay, electronic manufacturers. He was president of that group. So I called him, and I said, Al, I've got an issue here with some guys wanting to form a union. He said, got just the guy for you to talk to. And he gave me the name of a guy in L.A., Charles H. Goldstein. And I called this guy, and it was like, wow. He said, just sit tight, I'll be up there tomorrow or the next day or whenever it was, and, a couple of days. And in walks this guy, about 6'2", flaming red hair, the relatively large man. I mean, just, well-built guy, but brash, boastful, but boy, did he know what the heck he was doing when it came to unions. He grew up in a union family. His father was a Teamster. But basically, he represented companies in battling against unions. And he basically, him and his partners, mapped out how this would work in the liberal Ninth Circuit Court, which was where we were, the NLRB in that district, which was out of San Francisco, highly liberal. He said, you're never going to win this until you get through the Ninth Circuit Court. He said it's going to take a long time. But he mapped a plan, a strategy, and we followed it to the T. And they got these guys. They weren't highly intelligent, other than one guy. One guy was very intelligent, but the followers were, just young guys, and they just, somebody said get down and scrub in the dirt, and they do it. And they thought they were, Robert Garcia, the smart guy, had them convinced that they were at the forefront of something big in the Bay Area. But they ultimately, got in their own way. We had the evidence that they basically were intentionally slowing down, and it was hurting production. So Goldstein said, lock them out. Said, it's almost unprecedented, but you can do it because of what they're doing. So we gave them enough bait, and then we locked them out. And of course, the NLRB was, we had to fight the government. That's what a company has to do. It's not against the union; it's against the government. The government represents them. But Norm Kirschman wrote, who was one of Goldie's partners, an old ex-boxer, just died a year ago. But he wrote a great, and it's a landmark decision. You'll still find it, of Tomco versus the NLRB on behalf of the United Electrical Radio and Machine Workers of America, and we won. And we won that. They won. They confronted us in '72. We won the decision in '76.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was 4 years. It was it cost a lot of money in those days. It cost in excess of $50,000. But we did win.
Probably a huge distraction too from the business at hand, right?
Huge distraction at the time, sure, but we. A lot of things went on. We had to put up with punctured tires. We had to put up with, and of course, we also did a few things ourselves. And we covered the windows, and they try to crawl up and look over. And the amazing thing was that these were all young guys, and it was an 8 to 5 or it was 7 to 4 thing, whatever. 4 o'clock rolls around, they're gone. Of course, that's when we started doing the work. And but that was during some of the gas crisis. The '74 time frame was one of the gas crises, I remember. And because the UPS wouldn't pick things up, we'd have to take things over there, and of course they'd follow us. So one day, Glenn and I loaded up the back of I had a small wagon, and we loaded it up with these big boxes that were empty, but they didn't know it. And we drove all the way down to the dump in San Jose, and of course they tailed us, and they ran out of gas on the way back. We just waved, but and just threw the boxes in the dump and came back. And of course, that really ticked them off. So that resulted in a few flat tires. Glenn was really a devious guy at times, but he's a relatively long, skinny guy. But he got underneath one of their cars. We opened the back door. They were playing frisbee, and we'd go out there and cause a distraction. He went out, loosened the oil plug on one of the guy's cars, really and the guy got up the corner, and all the oil came out, and he burned up his engine. But a few things that we did they to sort of to satisfy ourselves that they weren't getting the best of us. But we had unfair labor practices filed. You had to answer every one of them before some administrative law judge who you knew you were going to lose. But Goldstein warned us about all this stuff, and we just went through it all. And then you get to the Ninth Circuit Court, and there you have real judges that look at things, and they decided that hey, these guys caused their own grief, and that was the end of it. But it was a long path to get to the end. We had a lot of guys visit us, like Bill Farranon came down and visited and showed me pictures. Bill had a real affinity for Chinese people for some reason. And he had started an assembly operation. This was Farranon Microwave. And he started an assembly operation up in Chinatown. And they infiltrated up there. And he was really, really hurt by that because, he was basically generating jobs for these people. And he brought down pictures, and there was a lot of these guys that I didn't recognize, but there obviously was one or two that, you couldn't miss. There was a guy that was very bright, Cuban. I think he's from Cuban parents, but his name was Robert Garcia. And he was a smart fellow. Misdirected, but he was a communist, vowed communist. The union was a former communist union. The union organizer was an old communist from the McCarthy era. I mean, you look his name up online today, Paul Chown, and you'd still see that he was affiliated, in a registered communist in Berkeley. He was a graduate of Cal, but he was a union organizer, and Robert was his man. Robert came by a few years later and said, like I said, I always admired the young fellow's intelligence. He was really a sharp guy, and he could do good work too. But he came in and said hello and said, how did you find that guy, and why did you go all the way to L.A. to get it? It's because I needed to win. I said, it was recommended by somebody that said if you want the best on the West Coast, that's who it is, was Charles Goldstein. So he said, I think you were right. So, but he was an organizer for many years in San Jose. I don't know what happened to him. I just don't know. Don't know. He'd be in his early 70s now, maybe. But a very smart, really an intellectual guy, a highly intellectual guy. But the rest of them were just kids that, there was a couple of black kids that, they heard the cry, easy money, easy money. You're going to get more, you're going to get more. All of them. They were all that way. So difficult to say how it would have worked any other way. I don't think the company would have had any value in Silicon Valley if it had been unionized. And of course, that was my thoughts for sure.